All right. Here we go. 71 people. $74. Yeah, so take a bit to populate. Right, I'm getting up to 80. So are you back?
Yeah, I'm back.
Yeah, we're up to 82. We'll probably have to give this about 5 minutes to load here.
Not a problem.
Meanwhile,
Trip I are maybe incorrect.
all right, we're still loading. We're up to 101. This is like watch the thermometer rise as you're cooking candy. Give it a couple more minutes here. Yeah, we're just waiting for the rest of the groups to sign in. I think we peaked here, Claude. I'm getting 103 on a hold for a bit. Are you the same numbers?
Pretty much, yes.
Yeah. Let's wait for another minute and then we're start.
That's good.
Yeah. I hope there we go. Getting a power surge. More people coming on. Yeah, we'll give another minute. It takes a while to populate. Trust the weather is beautiful across the country for everybody. I know in Ottawa. It's just stunning, stunning fall weather today. Allergy levels are high, but
Are the leaves beginning to fall, though?
no, they're turning. They're turning. Not
That's good.
quite orange. Well, it's been despite the rest of the province, we've had a lot of rain here, so they're not showing, at least within the city, not showing a lot of orangeness yet.
Yeah, we've had a lot of dry weather recently. My lawn seemed to have disappeared.
Oh, well, look at how much time you're saving cutting grass.
I was going to say, well, that's the good news. Less grass cutting.
Oh, I'm still getting my numbers increasing, so I think we will start.
Okay.
Anyway,
And
good afternoon, good morning, everyone. This is John Kudrowski speaking. I'll get Claude to introduce himself. We're pleased to be working with CMHC and again on another webinar. Last year was on mold, and today is on determinants of indoor air quality in First Nation housing. And so we're pleased to give this presentation. And so a couple housekeeping chats turned off, provide questions in Q&A. And at the end of the session, we'll be sending out a survey for feedback, which we value very much because we use that in terms of formatting and how to move forward for other webinars. Also, stay tuned for the FNNBOA. We've announced a number of different webinars coming up in the future, and so we'll be posting those and sending it out to everybody. And those will include everything from what to do for wind energy, stuff on national guide for net zero, and we have one on water architectural drawings and energy as poverty for First Nations. So we have about 6 webinar series we'll be announcing. So I will now, we have more join us, so I have to join us for coming in. Over to you, Claude.
Thank you, John, and welcome. And I'd like to thank everyone for attending today. My name's Claude Lawrenson. I'm an education consultant and member of FNNBOA. In case you do not know what that acronym stands for, the First Nation National Building Officers Association. But before I go too far into our presentation, I'd like to acknowledge my virtual workplace is within the traditional territories of the Indigenous nations. Although we may come from different communities and backgrounds, we are connected through traditions, values, and history of our ancestors. Please take a moment to reflect upon that. Certainly, reflect on the good things that the land and waters has brought us. Again, thank you. Let's get into we'll call it the meat of the topic of indoor air quality. So, determining factors and concerns about indoor air quality is not a new topic. It may be hard to believe, but indoor air can actually be, in some cases, 5 times more polluted than the air we're actually breathing outside. Indoor air is a crucial aspect of our presentation today. We will explore the definitions, the importance, and the factors influencing indoor air quality, along with the strategies for the improvements. Before moving on, I would also like to take a moment to acknowledge that this webinar has been thankfully sponsored by CMHC. Okay, let's see if we can get to the next slide here. My apologies. Next. Okay, today we'll start with the introduction to indoor air quality. detailing its definition and the pollutants that commonly affect it. This presentation will discuss the risk, the realities, and the remediation. We will also examine the health impacts associated with poor indoor air quality, followed by the methods for assessing it. We will also discuss various strategies for improving indoor air quality and conclude with an overview of relevant regulations and the guidelines. But before we go too much further, let's take a look at the reality. Why IAQ really matters. So as I mentioned, we're going to take a closer look at the main contributors and health impact of poor indoor air quality. We can see in the little slide breakout that I just popped up there, home time, 90% of our time indoors, 70% in our home. If we take a look at it and compare air, food, and water, do you know air consumption? We consume nearly 8 times as much air by volume as food and 4 times as much air as water. And as I mentioned earlier, indoor air versus outdoor air. Indoor air contains about 2 to 5 times as much pollution as a typical outdoor air. And of course, we can't forget nowadays, when we look at new construction, the impact of high-performance homes. Certainly, it lets in significantly less fresh air into homes compared to older, less efficient homes. So, introduction to IAQ, indoor air quality. What's under your kitchen sink? So I like to present this slide because it represents possibly a lot of homes probably have something that looks exactly like this or something similar. So understanding indoor air quality is essentially for creating healthy living and working environments. In this section, we're going to address the key components that define indoor air quality and its relevance to our health. Therefore, understanding and assessing indoor air quality is certainly of extreme importance. So again, I'll pose that question. So a brief question, what exactly is under your kitchen sink? Well, don't worry about it. We'll get into that and talk about it a little bit later. So what is indoor air quality and why is it so important? Well, if we kind of read the slide for a moment, indoor air quality refers to the condition of air inside buildings, which impacts both health and comfort. Poor indoor air quality can lead to health issues such as allergies, respiratory problems, fatigue, and can also reduce productivity and concentration levels in the workplace and also in homes. Well, indoor air quality involves the interaction between building materials, activities, and climate, along with the occupants. The air quality refers to the levels of pollutants in the air. It's important because we previously indicated that we spend most of our time indoors. So poor indoor quality, air quality that is, can lead to various health issues and reduced productivity. The quality of indoor air is influenced by a number of factors such as ventilation, temperature, humidity, and the presence of pollutants. Well, what are some of these common indoor air pollutants that I was mentioning? Well, we can break them down into 4 categories: particulate matter, volatile organic compounds, gases such as carbon monoxide, or biological contaminants. These are the main sources of indoor air pollution in any home. In fact, indoor air can be contaminated by a variety of pollutants, including that, as I mentioned, particulate matter, volatile organic compounds, carbon monoxide, and biological contaminants such as mold and dust. Identify these pollutants and the source is the first step in addressing IAQ. So our first step is identification, looking at the problems. So sources of indoor air pollutants can also include household products, building materials, combustion-fueled appliances, outdoor air infiltration, that's air leakage into the house, paints, pesticides, and so on. So understanding these sources helps us in alleviating their impact on indoor air quality. Did you know that even household bleach can prematurely cause rust and corrosion to metal ductwork? In fact, it can also destroy the heat exchanger in a forced air heating system when stored near metal, and that's bleach in close proximity to a furnace. Next, let's take a look at a few more sources. Here's a sampling list of other potential indoor air pollutants. Indoor air quality can be accomplished by a variety of pollutants and factors. Tobacco smoking is one of the major sources of indoor air pollution. But understanding these hazards is the first step in alleviating the risk. How about the outdoor sources? There's a lot of different outdoor sources, but let's just go through a few here. We can't forget about those outdoor sources that can also impact the indoor air quality. So outdoor air enters and leaves the house by what's called infiltration, natural ventilation, and through mechanical ventilation. So natural events such as even wildfires can suddenly increase outdoor pollution, overwhelmingly even in the indoor high-efficiency mechanical systems. Next, I have 6 photographs of different conditions. So what are the main things that you can see, the visible signs we can look for and observe in all of these images? They all provide us with visual clues. Do you recognize any of them as an indoor air quality concern? Just take a moment and kind of browse through them. And the answer is hopefully every one of them is a poor indoor air quality sign or proof and evidence. Next, let's talk about, in the previous photo, we saw the presence of water and moisture impact on various conditions in a house. Let's consider the moisture in a home. As an example, we look at this chart. The viruses do not spread well between 40 to 60% relative humidity. So that RH stands for relative humidity. So we must try and keep the relative humidity below 50% to reduce many common household problems. Relative humidity refers to the amount of moisture contained in the quantity of air compared to the maximum amount of moisture that the air can actually hold at that same temperature. You want to keep the indoor relative humidity low enough to prevent visible moisture problems. So again, when we take a look at viruses and you look at that chart, you can see it's within that 40 to 60% range. So it decreases in bar width and indicates a decrease in the actual impact or effect. So I mentioned next about biological contaminants or living things that are produced by, actually living things that are produced by living things. They include mold, house dust, bacteria, viruses, animal dander, cat saliva, pollen, cockroaches, mice, and so on. Chemical contaminants, on the other hand, include such matters such as radon, carbon monoxide, and likely some of those household cleaning products we saw earlier under that kitchen sink. So any part of a house system and environment can be a possible pollution source. The generation rate of pollution depends on the source and the strength. So again, thinking about the generation of pollutants, outdoor air in the ground, the building envelope, the house materials and furnishings, mechanical systems and devices, occupants and their activities. So it's just not necessarily one thing, it could be a combination of things. Next, let's talk a little bit about the health side of things, about the risk health impacts on poor indoor air quality. What are some of the health impacts related to poor indoor air quality is the question. Well, there can be short-term and long-term health-related concerns. Indoor air pollution can cause a range of health issues, including respiratory disease, heart disease, cognitive deficits, and even cancer. The C word. Oh boy. Exposure limits, long-term or short-term, represent the guidelines reference measurements for the concentration of an indoor air contaminant. So indoor air contaminants can affect people in different ways. Cause and effect have been established for some diseases that can pose dangerous living conditions. As an example, carbon monoxide related to fuel-fired appliances such as heating equipment is caused by malfunctioning or combustion products backdrafting into the home. While the exact short-term and long-term maximum for carbon monoxide levels recommended for safety differ worldwide, the consensus is that high levels, generally above 100 parts per million, with no one experiencing symptoms, should be treated as an urgent matter. 200 parts per million or greater will cause physical symptoms and is fatal within hours. 800 parts per million of CO or greater is fatal within minutes. So symptoms of poor air quality. Poor indoor air quality can lead to various symptoms, as I indicated earlier. Eye irritation, or even respiratory issues. So short-term exposure to poor indoor air quality can cause these symptoms, such as even headaches, dizziness, fatigue, eye irritation, respiratory issues. And these effects can certainly affect you as an individual in your daily life. What about the long-term consequences? When we look at long-term consequences, chronic exposure to poor indoor air quality may lead to severe health problems. This can include asthma, cardiovascular diseases, and other respiratory conditions. Long-term health risks must be taken seriously. Next, assessing indoor air quality. I want to give credit to the Workers' Compensation Board of WorkSafe BC for their permission to present this information to you over to the right-hand side. So when we start assessing indoor air quality, it's key to identify the potential problems. And then in this next section, we'll cover various methods and tools that we can utilize for measuring indoor air quality and to get better understanding of the indicators that signal poor air quality. To start, an IAQ complaint flowchart can be useful in assessing the concerns such as the one depicted here. So if we start at the top, we can see we conduct a walkthrough inspection. Is there an obvious explanation for the complaints? Yes or no? And we can flow down through the path of yes, implement a solution. Has the problem been fixed and complaints been stopped? Follow up to make sure the problem doesn't reoccur. And we can basically, if that flow through is completed, it can be considered as completed or done. When we take the path of no, is there an obvious explanation for the complaints? No, well, we're going to have to conduct a more detailed investigation. Did you find the cause of the complaints? And consider hiring an outside consultant to certainly assist you with that type of issue or concern. So again, a pretty common sense approach of just simply having a nice flow chart to think about how to start down the path of trying to solve the problem. So here's a couple of my inspection tools. I've done numerous inspections, some for indoor air quality, some for just general conditions of construction and housing in buildings in general. So some common methods for measuring indoor air quality include air sampling. So in the upper photograph there, or image to the right-hand side, is an air sampling equipment. Over and under it is basically a low-cost means of measuring humidity and temperature. So as we can see here, is indicating in my basement 32%, or my office in the basement, and an average temperature of 74.9 degrees Fahrenheit. So again, there are tools and equipment available to do some basic, we'll call it preliminary sampling. So common methods for measuring indoor air quality includes air sampling, humidity testing, and the use certainly of some specialized equipment to assess the pollutant levels. Regular monitoring is essential for maintaining a healthy indoor air quality. Well, we can see the first step is to identify the problem. And the second step is to identify the cause and or the source. And when we take a look at it, we can approach it from a four-part solution basis. Removal of the pollutant, sealing of the materials, ventilation, in other words, introducing fresh air and removing stale or moist air from its source, and the last one, filtering the air for particulates, and in rare cases, it may be a gas such as radon. So solving an indoor air quality problem requires proper identification of problems that are the cause. As I indicated, there's a four-part strategy for dealing with indoor pollutants. The source of problem can be remote to where the problem is actually noticed. So the source control is a primary strategy for good indoor air. Removing the source of the contaminant is more effective than relying simply on ventilation to dilute concentration. Ventilation can be a source control method for removing moisture or pollutants at their source, such as using an exhaust fan in a bathroom or a kitchen or over a specific work area. So there's some established indicators and standards that help evaluate indoor air quality. These include acceptable levels of specific pollutants and ventilation rates, and also humidity levels. So we take a look at it, we can see that pollutant levels, acceptable levels, ventilation rates, and humidity levels rather, all play a role in evaluating indoor air quality. So if we go over to the right-hand side in those blue box areas, Health Canada conducts health risk assessment for indoor air contaminants, and it has developed a residential indoor air quality guideline, which is issued as a voluntary objective under the Canadian Environmental Protection Act. Generally, the required ventilation rates are about 5 to 10 liters of outdoor air for each house occupant, or roughly a complete house air exchange every 3 hours. Can you imagine that? Complete air exchange of all the volume of air in your house every 3 hours. That's getting fresh air into your house. But these rates vary according to the number of occupants, the house volume, and occupant activities, and presence of indoor source of pollutants. So as an example, if we have a lot more people in a house, certainly these ventilation rates need to be increased by the number of people. The perfect humidity level in your home largely depends on the season. So for example, I live in the balmy south of Ontario, down near Windsor, Ontario, and we have very high humid summers, very hot humid summers rather. And as we were just kind of discussing prior to our startup here, some areas, they've had a lot more rain, a lot less humidity. So again, these all have an impact on what we can experience when we talk about even the indoor air quality as being an issue. Next, sensoring monitoring tools. Again, we take a look at advancement in technologies have led to development of various sensors and monitoring tools that provide real-time data on indoor air quality. These tools help in proactive detection, management, and improvement of indoor air quality. I'll kind of point out a few. So, for example, in the upper right-hand corner for humidity measuring, that binary unit is a similar one that I had showed earlier with the measurement readings on it. It's not very expensive. The one next to it measures both temperature and humidity, just kind of a little desktop unit. Carbon monoxide. Hopefully every house that has a combustion fueled appliance has a carbon monoxide detector. So you can see the reading in my house is 0. That's good news. And then if we go down towards the bottom, we see one for radon. So this Airthings measurement tool helps track radon in my house. It's going 24/7, and I've had it for a year and a half, almost 2 years now, and it's measuring the amount of radon in becquerels in my house. So again, when we take a look, the reading in my house is 92, long-term average, and the short-term average is 82, all within that's a 1-day limit, and that's within certainly a good, safe range. The last tool over to the left-hand side is me measuring carbon monoxide, okay, or combustion gases on a forced air furnace. By the way, that's kind of looks like it fell on its side. No, that's a horizontal, basically forced air gas furnace in a crawl space. Again, kind of unusual maybe for some of you to see something like that. But imagine your furnace kind of tipped over on its side. It's designed that way on purpose for crawl spaces or tight spaces such as attics. Next, let's talk a little bit about remediation. Some strategies for improving indoor air. We've seen previously, I've talked about some of the issues and some of the tools that can be used to, well, kind of almost do it yourself if you like, without necessarily having to call in a professional. Well, when we talk about improving indoor air quality, it involves implementing effective strategies and practices. In this section, we're going to outline some various approaches that can improve the air that we actually breathe indoors. So this is important. Strategies for improving that indoor air quality, basically, we have to look at requires identifying the problem, the source, and applying that 4-part solution. Pollutant removal, sealing the materials, ventilation to remove the moisture and the pollutants. In other words, getting the moisture out of the house, and certainly air filtration, not infiltration. Well, air infiltration will help, but that's called a leaky house. That's air leaking into the house. So source control is more effective than ventilation alone. So again, where's the source? We got to track down the source. There we go. Ventilation. Okay, so when we talk about ventilation, we see a nice kitchen over to the left-hand side of this photographic image. There are many ways of ventilating a house. In this example, a kitchen range hood in a window is required. Building codes and ventilation standards play a large part in deciding what type is most appropriate. Ventilation is a basic requirement to control moisture and provide a means of adequate indoor air quality. If you're not ventilating your home, the air can possibly, as I indicated before, be 2 to 5 times worse than the actual outside air. So when we take a look at this, we can see that the importance of ventilation. So it's essential for maintaining healthy indoor air quality and preventing buildup of those pollutants. Good ventilation includes at least the following. Look for exhaust from the bathroom and kitchen. Fresh air supply to bedrooms and main living areas. Quiet, controllable air delivered at a comfortable temperature. Balanced airflow, otherwise ventilation systems can cause negative pressures. And if negative pressures do exist, especially with a fuel-fired appliance, there's a chance of the product's combustion, what they call backdrafting, coming back into the house, which is basically carbon monoxide. So again, in our little diagram here, a little illustration off to the left side, we can see various ways to provide ventilation. We have central ventilation, okay, supply and an exhaust system. So fresh air coming in, the green arrow, we'll call it the bad or the poor air quality or air being removed from the house as exhaust. Well, what about a window? We can always open a window, or we can always open the door, but not always such a great thing when we think about the cost of heating, especially in those cold winter days. How about the bathroom fan? Or how about the kitchen fan? Or those holes in the building envelope? The building codes are asking for us to build tighter construction, but there's still going to be some air leakage in any home. And how about ducts to return to the air plenum? So we have, for example, that represents a little forced air furnace. We have fresh air coming in, and we're going to basically be spilling out or exhausting out the combustible gases to the exterior. So natural ventilation utilizes outside air to improve indoor air quality through openings such as windows and doors. When we take a look at the mechanical side of things, we take a look at fans and the HVAC as heating, ventilating, and air conditioning system to control the indoor air quality effectively by circulating air. One thing, even when I talked about the mold in my previous session, quite a while back, I talk about air must move in a house. You must have air movement to reduce moisture buildup and certainly reduce even mold. Same thing applies when we talk about pollutants that exist in the house, such as those possible pollutants under the kitchen sink. We need air circulation. Air must be moving in a house. Air exchange techniques, methods are both passive and active, help dilute indoor pollutants and improve certainly air quality. So these are some of the techniques such as natural, mechanical, and simply air exchange to help dilute those indoor air pollutants. Next slide here looks pretty complicated. It's actually really not. There are 3 different approaches to ventilation. The tighter the building envelope and an awareness of the indoor air quality problems have led to increased use of mechanical ventilation systems. So these are 3 different approaches here. These primary 3 approaches to ventilation, as indicated are basically indicated in this illustration. So effective ventilation helps improve air quality because it reduces pollutants and certainly the moisture buildup levels. There's actually a 4th system which combines supply and exhaust. So when we take a look at the types of systems, you'll see number 1 is an exhaust-only system. Okay. So we have simply an exhaust fan bringing in air, or such as an open window, or it's simply exhausting it out. A supply only, and then the balance system. So for example, it says for the balance system, HRV, a heat recovery ventilation system, or in some cases it might be what's called an ERV, energy recovery ventilation system. So again, the importance of moving air and bringing, we'll call it fresh air in and exhausting that stale air, we'll call it out, helps in improving indoor air quality. Some pretty basic concepts. Next, when we talk about ventilation requirements, well, now we're starting to take a look at a little bit about the building code side of things. Building codes provide the minimum acceptable ventilation requirements as indicated in this table on the right-hand side. We'll get into it there in a moment. The rate at which outdoor air replaces the indoor air is described as the air exchange rate. ASHRAE, which is basically the American Society of Heating, Refrigeration, and Air Conditioning Engineers, recommends through its standard, I won't get into the actual standard, the ventilation and acceptable indoor air quality for a residential building. So that homes receive 0.35 air changes per hour. So think about a 1/3 of an air change per hour, basically a full air change every 3 hours for your typical house. That's a complete house air exchange every 3 hours. Is that actually happening in your house? Is it actually happening in any building? But installing high-performance fans, you can help mitigate in the removal of that stale, moist, and polluted air. You can't do it with just your bathroom fan alone or just a kitchen fan alone. So when we take a look at the building code, this is just sort of my interpretation, derivative from the building code, National Building Code of Canada. We can see that it is expressed in metric units, liters per second, maybe for some of us, cubic feet per minute, CFM. So it's based on the number of bedrooms in a house. So if we have, for example, a 3-bedroom house, the minimum requirement is an exhaust fan of 46.6. I don't know of any manufacturers that actually measure it to 46.6. It's probably 50 CFM, just to give you a general idea. And of course, the maximum would be 67.8 or about 70 CFM. So in my house, as an example, I tried the 50 CFM. It's good, it works, but the 70 CFM does a much better job. So again, moisture buildup. How do I get it out of the house? So again, when we think about an exhaust fan. So again, ventilation, how much is needed? Depends on the size and the layout of the house. Also the amount of insulation in the house. The climate or climate zone, we like to call it, according to building code speak, is the climate zone that you live in. So for example, do you live in the southern part of the province or a more northern extreme? And certainly the indoor air quality, the actual condition that is being, that has to be dealt with. Next, we see another image here, and this is the heat recovery ventilation system. Again, I'd like to give credit to a home inspector business, The Illustrated Home. This is taken from their book of images that a lot of inspectors use as a reference guide, kind of a image illustration reference guide. We can see the green arrow, which is basically indicating that's the fresh air coming in. And as it goes through the heat exchanger, it actually is going to pick up that even in the winter, from that cold temperature, some of that blue or that red that's basically being exhausted, heat coming through the mechanical system, through the heat exchanger and being exchanged to preheat some of that colder air. Hence, it turns a lot warmer, so I show it in red. When it's exhausting through the house, is being expelled from the house, the warm, moist exhaust air is going through that heat exchanger, and basically it doesn't come in direct contact with that air. It actually has a little plastic film that separates the two, almost like different little cell compartments within the heat exchanger. So it transfers that heat into that colder air, and simply it's exhausting that warm, moist, stale air to the exterior. So that's how it basically is. We'll call it a super deluxe fan is really what this heat recovery ventilation system is. And you'll see there's a condensate drain, and that condensate drain means, hey, that moisture has to go somewhere. So there's what they call a little drip pan. So that it falls down into the bottom of the heat exchanger compartment. And that condensate drain hopefully is connected to a floor drain and basically takes that moisture that is being removed and basically drains it away out of the box, heat exchanger box. So HRVs control excess humidity. So as an example, in my house, I built a house back in the late 80s. And in my house, I tried to, think I had all the answers to my build based on my construction and architecture background. And decided not to put in a heat recovery ventilation system. Well, a couple of years into it, because of new construction, there's a lot of moisture in new construction, wood drying out, materials drying out, the house drying out, going through heating seasons. So what happens is moisture builds up in the house. And if it can't escape, guess it's going to start causing issues such as maybe potential for not such a great indoor air quality anymore, and potentially the other M word, mold development. So I turned around and decided I better put a heat recovery ventilation system in. So again, the heat recovery ventilation system in my house covers the laundry room, the kitchen, and the 2 bathrooms in the house. So it basically helps control and supplement even the bathroom fans that I have in the 2 bathrooms. So again, it's really does a wonderful job. Okay, but drilling down to it, they're 80% more effective than your basic fan. 80% more effective. An air exchanger is a balanced system where the air is pumped both in and out in equal amounts. So that's called a balanced air system. Remember, I was mentioning that if you have too much negative, we'll call it exhaust going out of the house, you can, especially with fuel-fired appliances, start to have backdrafting of those combustion gases, causing carbon dioxide to come back into the house. Well, that's not a good thing. So we want a balanced air exchange system. And that's what a heat recovery ventilation system. So for every bit coming in, there's an equal bit, we'll say, returning and exiting out. Okay, so far too often these reasonably simple mechanical devices can fail when it comes to the issue of maintenance. That's a whole other topic on maintenance of heat recovery ventilation systems. It's actually fairly simple. But quite often we see units that have not been maintained. But I hope to help you see it as just another actual easy household task to put on that, we'll call it honey-do list. So this is actually an image of my heat recovery ventilation system with the, we'll call it the access door open. So clean your HRV air filters by following these steps. So I kind of point out, I want to just point out a couple of the things right off the bat. So this is the open box of the heat exchanger unit itself. That number 3 is actually the filters. Okay, so I can pull those out and wash them and clean them and put them back in. There is sort of outside the box, you'll see 2 ducts going to the left, and there's actually 2 ducts going to the right. And those are those supply and exhaust ductworks. And again, that little exchanger core is sort of towards the middle of the unit. There's a motor, there's fan controls, high speed, low speed. So there's some minor controls on it. So again, we can take a look at that. And of course, the bottom of the unit, there's a drain. So again, a little, we'll call it plastic tube coming off that goes off to in my case, a sump pump pit. So again, I'm not going to go through all the actual steps, but you can see here it's fairly simple. Turn it off, clean that filter, remove it, and so on, okay? And basically, once it's dry, put it back in and put the unit back on, and away we go. And I do that about 3 to 4 times a year, so about every couple of months. But every once in a while, if it's been, we'll call it maybe a task that I need to do, I'll pull it out and just check it to make sure that it's not very dirty. So again, helping to ventilate and basically improve the air in the house. Okay, so next we're going to talk about, how about just regular filters, air purifiers and filtration systems. So over 90% of the particles in the air are less than what is known in scientific terms as 1 micron and invisible to the naked eye. However, they are respirable, capable of breathing in. Air purifiers and filtration systems can significantly reduce indoor air pollutants. To give you an idea, a piece of photocopy paper, if you think of a piece of regular paper, is approximately 100 microns. I just mentioned that the particles could be as small as 1 micron. So, you'd have to see it under magnification. So the different types of filters, such as you might have heard of HEPA filters, capture particulate matters in the range of 0.3 microns, okay, and improve overall air quality. A standard furnace filter removes approximately 50% of particles at 10 microns, just to kind of give you a general idea. And is estimated at filtering approximately 5% of the particle size at 0.3 microns. The good news, filters work, but obviously not as good as some of the others can work, such as the one illustrated here. So again, what's the old saying? You kind of get what you pay for when it comes to filters. So I have a forced air furnace in my house, forced air gas furnace, and I change the filters. I probably check them every 2 months, and I put in, we'll call it a little more expensive, higher end filter. Why? Because it's doing a better job at filtering out any dust and dirt that can accumulate in the house. It's not as good as some of the HEPA filters. So for example, HEPA filters are designed to capture almost 100%, just shy of 100% of particulate matter, ensuring cleaner air in your living space. So again, if we take a look at it, this is my filter, so to speak. So just to kind of give you an idea. So again, I threw this chart in here. So when we take a look at the particle size, human hair is 10 microns. Pollen is roughly 3 microns. Observable dust in the air, when you can see it floating on a nice sunny day, and you can see those little particles floating around, 10 microns. Mold spores of 1 to 100 microns, and so on. So we can see here that there's a lot of things that are very, very minute and small and almost undetectable that actually can be filtered. So again, you know, certainly you're entitled to buy what you want when filters, but when I think about it for my house and the health considerations for the family, I want to spend a little bit more money to make sure that the air is as clean as possible. Not perfect, but clean. Well, perfect would be nice. Next, identifying and reducing sources of indoor pollutants is essential for improving, certainly, air quality. This includes using low VOC, volatile organic compound products. So a lot of things such as paint in the past had these high VOC products. Again, a lot of the paints are water-based, so they reduce a lot of the oils and we'll call it other products, chemicals that are within paints. So when we take a look at things such as how do we maintain cleanliness in a house, and certainly try to avoid people from smoking indoors. I love it when I see people that are polite enough to go smoke out, we'll say outside. So one important consideration is a fan must be running in a house to bring fresh air in and take that stale air out. That's a basic minimum. So next, if a house is well sealed and a series of through-wall exhaust fans are installed, this can lead to depressurization, resulting in backdrafting, drawing in CO, that's carbon monoxide, into the house. Installing a supply-only system in a leaky house leads to more moisture being drawn into the structure. So when we think of the old farmhouses or old buildings, they were poorly insulated, a lot of, we'll call it gaps in the general construction, not as tightly fitted detail to the actual construction that's required today. Too little ventilation leads to a buildup of pollutants in the air. In new construction furnishings and flooring and coverings, we have to think about them as materials that can also give off things such as formaldehyde. I show this water heater off to the side because when we take a look at it, this is a gas water heater, okay? And we take a look at that vent sitting on top. We see we have 2 water lines coming in. One would be cold, the other hot. So, okay, for your heated water. And then we take a look at that, what's called the flue or the pipe on top of that water heater. And we'll see there's a gap there. So it's basically going to take combustion gases and vent those combustion gases out up that metal pipe to the exterior. I want you to note, if you can see it reasonably clear, is the brown staining around the top of that water heater. That is what I call the signs, to me, visible evidence of what's called backdrafting. In other words, combustion gases came back into the house. And by the way, all of those little brown particles are probably metal from the heated duct that's exhausting that warm or hot air of the house with combustion gases. So that's visible evidence. If I look at something like that, I say, well, you know, you've had backdrafting in this house. You've had some negative air pressure concerns. So again, things, little nuances like that, when you look at things, getting back to those 6 images I showed earlier, there's signs of things that happen in a house based on what we can see visibly without even doing a lot of testing. Next, regulations and guidelines. Who loves regulations and guidelines? Well, thankfully we have them. So the regulations and guidelines play a vital role in ensuring healthy indoor air quality. So this section, we're going to briefly discuss the legislative framework and best practices to follow. So when we think about the regulation, government regulations and standards, as I mentioned earlier, certainly Health Canada has standards, building code has standards. So they set the standards for indoor air quality to protect the public and certainly your health. These standards guide building practices and air quality management efforts. So again, these regulations aim to protect public health. When we take a look at public health, well, how about building practices management? Again, the standards guide building design and air quality management to enhance living and working conditions. So as my, with my background in architecture and construction, in the construction field, again, we have to know the building codes. We have to understand how much and why we need a fan in a bathroom or a fan in a kitchen or why we need ventilation in a house. It's not just about simply windows and doors. Certainly it's also understanding some of the mechanical systems that go along with it. So what are some of the best practices? Well, adopting the industry's best practices is crucial for maintaining indoor air quality. These practices often include guidelines for the ventilation, or pollutant management, and regular air quality assessment. So when we take a look at this slide, proper ventilation is crucial to ensure fresh air circulation and reduce indoor pollutants. Again, pollutant management, implement effective pollutant management strategies to help minimize harmful substances in the air. Regular air quality assessment, conducting regular air quality assessments ensures compliance with the standards and identifies areas for improvement. Now, when it comes to housing, it's not always going to be a regular air quality assessment. I taught at the local college and we had a health and safety committee, and certainly there were air quality tests done on I won't say often, but often enough basis to make sure that the air quality was not impacting people working in the building. So next, strategies for improving indoor air quality. So it includes adequate ventilation, regular cleaning, the use of low VOC products, incorporating indoor plants. By the way, don't overdo the indoor plants too much because sometimes that's going to create more moisture. Control humidity, smoke outdoors, limit chemical usage, or at least read the labels and see what's in the product. Utilize air purifiers, or in some cases filters, and conduct periodic IAQ testing. I conduct even periodic IAQ testing when I look at a house, look around the house and see what's going on. Look at the different surfaces. Again, talking about some of these standards. As previously indicated, building codes and certifications often include specifications for establishing indoor air quality. Compliance with building codes ensures that all buildings are designed and sustained to provide healthy and safe indoor living environments. For clarification, when it comes to IAQ, indoor air quality, it's largely based on a standard, and that's the ASHRAE standard, that one we see in the kind of in the middle of there. Okay, the American Society of Heating, Refrigeration, Air Conditioning Engineers. Okay, also depicted is a guideline booklet from Health Canada in the lower right corner. And of course, above it, the National Building Code of Canada talks about air quality and ventilation. So again, to go back to our what's under the kitchen sink. Remember that question? What's under your sink? So in 2024, a review by Selin and others highlights that many mainstream cleaning products contribute to indoor air pollution and respiratory risks through exposure to these volatile chemicals in those particulates. Fortunately, evidence-based measures such as better ventilation, safer building choices, and user awareness can signify and reduce these risks and promote healthier indoor environments. What's the old adage? If in doubt, remember to read the label. So when we think about it, sometimes we take for granted what's actually in some of these products and what harm they may or may not do. So again, bleach, you know, a gas. Nobody would like to smell bleach for a long period of time, that is for sure. So again, remember what's under your kitchen sink, what's in the garage, what's in your storage containers. That one we think about where we might possibly store chemicals. In my case, maybe even the basement. So simply understanding improving indoor air quality is essential for our health and well-being. By being aware of these pollutants, their sources, and the effective strategies for improvement, we can create safer indoor environments for everyone. You can benefit from the efforts to improve air quality if you know how to operate and maintain ventilation equipment and combustion appliances. So, I mean, in the case of a bathroom fan, it's the bathroom fan. Even if it's not working, consider replacing it. It's a valuable piece of creating good ventilation, even as a simple bathroom fan in a house. It's better than no fan. Okay, you can benefit from the efforts to improve air quality if you know how to operate and maintain those ventilation equipment and certainly those combustion appliances. This gets to be a pretty complicated slide, but actually it really talks to the whole thing about optimistically. Now, when we are looking back, we can recognize the main contributors of poor indoor air quality and the impact it can present to the building's occupants. So we think about, you know, the pet in the house and the people in the house and the activities that happen, cooking, cleaning, smoking, bathing, you know, going in and out of the house. We're also bringing air exchange of possibly pollutants from outdoors, indoors, and indoors, outdoors. We see there's an impact on health. There's an impact on the potential of developing certainly disease. We think about the outdoor air quality. We have to think about things such as traffic. As an example, how close are you to a place where we have a lot of vehicles that may be contributing to pollution, or forest fires, or just simply road dust. So the type of ventilation is important by type, operation, and certainly how to control contamination, and certainly the factor of maintenance. And of course, there's the indoor environment when we think about lighting and temperature and humidity, and certainly your visual comfort. So again, there's a number of things that all feed into when we think about indoor air quality. Well, how about the actual indoor air quality? What building materials exist in your house? Are they good, really? So, for example, some of the products are basically polluters. So we think about things such as, asbestos or lead or some other things. How about the formaldehyde in plastic and plastic furniture, and also wood-based glues that go into a lot of building products? So I say even the furnishings, the cleaning agents, and so on. So when we look at the ground, how about the soil moisture rising up from the ground and into the house? Or how about the potential for radon of seeping into the house? So again, optimistically, we can look back and we can recognize the main contributors of these indoor air quality impact that it can present to the building's occupants. Reducing indoor pollutant involves use of low VOCs, maintaining cleanliness, and avoiding indoor smoking. Caution is needed, especially with new well-sealed houses today. But with multiple exhaust fans, the risk of depressurization can also exist. So we must have a balanced ventilation system. It has to be well designed. Okay. Next. If you want to learn more, consider looking at a few resources that are readily available out there. The one over to the right-hand side from Health Canada is one example of ventilation indoor air quality. So a number of good, we'll call it indoor air quality resources there. I mentioned a few. So for example, Health Canada, ventilation in the indoor environment. A YouTube video, what is IAQ testing and do I really need it? How about air quality and health? So there's an awareness resource. Or CCOH, Center for Community and Occupational Health, okay, on indoor air quality in general. So again, this poster is an illustration on the right-hand side. Finally, I want to thank you. Remember that the air we breathe is important for you and your family's health and certainly safety. That is the end of my presentation. So I thank everyone very much for the patience of listening to me. I hope there's some takeaways from today's session. I look forward to any feedback. Thank you.
Thank you, Claude. So we've got a couple of questions in the Q&A section. I'm not sure if you're able to see them, Claude, or would you like me to read them out?
Sure, go ahead and read them if you don't mind.
Sure. So the first question I can answer, can we get a copy of the presentation? A copy will be sent to all participants, no problem, as well as the recording. First question, do you have recommendations on specific instruments to measure IAQ?
Yes, I do. It just depends on the, well, let's sort of back up a minute. It depends on the type of sampling or testing you're looking for. If it's indoor air quality, usually it's an air sample system. So it's basically, it could be something as simple as using equipment that will basically sniff and take a reading and basically put it in a tube and have it tested through a lab. I physically don't do, I physically can do the testing, but all work is always sent to a lab for an independent review of what is the material and the results. So again, all testing is done by private labs. Now, when it comes to specific equipment, if they have something specific in mind, I certainly can advise them on different equipment that I've used, so they can feel free to contact me if they want a bit more follow-up on it. Okay.
Wonderful. We'll be sure to share your contact information following the session as well.
Yes.
Second question, if the humidity outside, so the fresh air, is 70% or greater, and the temperature is warm/hot, are HRVs able to control the humidity indoors to a comfortable 50%?
No, that can be, honestly, that's exactly what I have to put up with down in the Windsor area in the summer. It sounds very similar to, like I say, my situation. I will shut it off on the very hot, humid days because you're really trying to, are you really sort of neutralizing the whole effect of the system itself? So I would say, yeah, there are points where the HRV can be challenged by certainly high moisture readings, high humidity days on the outside of a house, pulling that air in. So even in the summer months, as an example, which seems to be that sort of example we're talking about, that humidity being drawn into the house certainly isn't going to help the system. My recommendation is I turn off my HRV, not permanently, just for a day or two if needs be. And I run a dehumidifier in the house to drop down the moisture and humidity levels. So see, another, we'll say, piece of equipment that is very useful, especially in high humid areas, is certainly dehumidifier.
Okay, thank you. And we do have a hand up as well. So maybe we could go to the hand. I believe it's Beth, if you wanted to unmute and ask your question.
I'm sorry, do I have control of that, or is it on your end?
Let's see.
I don't see any unmute on my side. Sorry.
No, I think she put her hand down. Maybe what we could try is try it in the Q&A chat there, Beth, if you have that question. We'll go to the next question in the meantime. What is a safe radon level range in a home?
Under 200 becquerels. Anything above that requires immediate attention. Mine, you saw probably long-term, 92. So that's what's considered safe. It doesn't mean that it's perfect. So again, it can vary, but certainly the threshold number where we have major concerns is at 200 parts per million.
Okay.
Or actually, the reading is 200. As an example, is John still on? John might not be with us still, but
he still is, yes.
Yeah, John had a high reading in his house, and maybe he could briefly tell you what he did to mitigate his problem. John? Oh, you might have stepped away. But anyways, John Kudrowski, you know, a friend and consultant. We work a lot together. He's in the Ottawa area, and he had a high reading, well over 200. And a lot of it was simply, for example, he has a sump pit in the basement. And around the sump pit, there was sort of openings around the pit where the concrete kind of is formed to the actual shape of the pit. So there was basically a crack, we'll call it, or opening around it. One method is simply sealing it and finding out where the leakage could occur. So looking at things a little carefully, such as that. Even cracks in a concrete floor can't allow that invisible gas, because it really is a soil gas that will come up through little cracks and crevices out of the soil and seep into the house. Worst case scenario, you could be talking a soil mitigation system, which means basically getting into a fan and piping that's going to basically take it from the source, which is basically down at the lowest level of the house, and out through the roof, or possibly in some cases through the side of the house. So again, it can be a pretty expensive system when we start talking about what would it cost to mitigate it. And I would say in the thousands of dollars, not necessarily tens of thousands, but certainly could be $2,000 to $5,000. I think the fan alone for radon is around $2,000 by itself, close to it.
Yeah, thank you. I think we've corrected the unmute situation, but we'll go over to Beth Hillside Housing. I see that they put their question in the Q&A. So the question is, do you have a list of low VOC products for cleaning?
I don't. You know, I always hate to say it. I refer to my granddaughter. Grandpa, check it out on the internet. It has everything. But no, I don't have a list, to be honest about the answer. Certainly, read the labels is important because you know, some chemicals you may not be aware of that are in some of the household products are certainly can be hazardous. Yes.
Okay, and we'll try the unmute here. So I think over to Kiefer. You have a question. Hopefully it works.
Kiefer?
Okay, I believe it's still in mute. We'll
Okay.
have to see if we can fix that. But I know he's posed a question here in the chat as well, so I'll read that out. Just a second. With respect to furnace filters, can I overdo it, or is higher filtration always better?
Again, the higher filtration is better. So as an example, I used to use we'll call it, the affordable cheap. We'll call it, go to Canadian Tire and find out what's on special, a cheap filter for my furnace. And then my wife started getting concerned about the fact that we were starting to get a lot of dust, not so much dirt, but dust buildup around the house, more often cleaning. And I started looking at the actual filters itself, how well, when you start researching it, that some of these filters were doing. And they do a reasonable job. But again, the higher quality ones are certainly going to capture more of the lower, we'll say, smaller particles, less chance of, I guess more chance of controlling what's in the air, basically circulating through my forced air heating system. Because you gotta remember that heating is good in the winter, and I live almost in air conditioning in the summer here, so constantly I'm having air blown at me, whether it's heat or cooler, more comfortable air. So I want that to be filtered, so I'm breathing not so much that dust and whatever's in the air, pollutants. So if I can minimize that, good for me, good for my wife, good for the family. So certainly, some of the filters aren't cheap, certainly. More is not always better, but look for better quality. Look at the rating in microns on the actual filter, if it's indicated. And that's what I was trying to represent on the one slide is the ones I'm using now are certainly probably almost double the cost of what my regular ones were, but certainly it does a much more satisfying job as far as air quality control on that forced air system.
Okay, yes. And another question that just came in. Do you have a home checklist for initial inspections? Like if we were training people to do maintenance on reserve-owned homes?
Actually, it's kind of an interesting question because in December, I'm going to be doing Train the Trainer for maintenance training on homes in Winnipeg. We're going to have a group certainly attending that course and taking the Train the Trainer session on home maintenance. But aside from that, yes, a list has been developed, both from a number of different points of view, whether it's monthly, we'll call it seasonally, or annually. When it comes to maintenance, I think it's important that certainly longevity in any house and longevity for people is consideration of certainly that word called maintenance. So yes, we can help you in that area if you're looking for further information.
We also have another question. So instruments for housing departments to conduct these recommended periodic tests for indoor air quality, maybe when it's not feasible to have a third-party agent and a lab involved?
It depends exactly what you're looking for, but there's a number of inspection testing tools that it can range from a $25 tool to almost thousands of dollars. So for example, my air testing equipment is probably in the range of close to just under $1,000, plus the cost of the lab work to have it done. The gas sniffer, as an example, the one where I showed the horizontal furnace and using what's called the gas sniffer, which is basically not only just smelling gas, but any combustible gas, it can detect. That piece of equipment is, companies such as Union Gas, the gas utility companies use it. Higher end than certainly what I have as as we'll call it a housing inspector. That can range in the, probably in the $400 to $500 mark. Again, one of those little in-house reading for temperature and humidity. I think the most expensive one I've ever bought was like $35. So again, it can vary depending on what you're trying to measure. So for example, humidity and temperature, I've got that little binary unit, runs on a battery. I replace a battery maybe once a year. The radon one, John actually introduced me to that one. I had known about it, and he bought it and used it, and he said, "Hey, I got high readings in my house. What do I do?" I said, "Oh, I thought of buying one," and so I bought one, and it was about $150, and that'll measure radon in the house. In fact, it's sitting right up behind me on one of those little metal racks. It's reading 24/7, and like I say, it's been. I don't think I've even changed the batteries in it yet, and it's like a year and a half later. It's still reading for me every day. So again, depends what you want to look for. I think that was in the range, like I say, roughly about $150. Again, you want to make sure, because radon's a colorless, odorless gas. You don't know until, unfortunately, somebody gets sick, and it may cause certainly harmful health issues. So again, there's a lot of tools out there without having to get the experts in. So unless it's something that's really off the wall, like a house full of mold, well, that's a huge issue. Reading indoor air quality, again, use visual clues. I depicted even around the toilet and the bathroom. In fact, any plumbing fixture, there's a possibility of water and mold and damage. When we take a look, like under the kitchen sink, I like to use that as an example. Is what's under the kitchen sink is just about everything and anything when it comes to chemicals.
Thank you. I think that's all the questions we have here in the Q&A, but we have resolved the unmute button. So if there's anybody in the audience there
Okay.
that has any questions, they'd like to put their hand up, pose a question, you're welcome to do so, or put them in the chat. Okay, we've got a question there from White Bear First Nation. Like to go ahead?
Hi, Claude. Great presentation. Just curious about this, like looking at new construction code in Saskatchewan, Manitoba, they have a radon pipe coming up from the basement that needs to be installed with the foundation. And is that the mechanism that's used to kind of connect a fan to exhaust that radon through the roof that you were talking about?
Yes, yeah, great. Thank you. A great question, and a great response as far as what you've indicated. Yeah, across Canada, radon is an issue, and certainly lesser amounts in some areas, higher amounts in quite a number of areas, surprisingly. But the building codes across the country have basically require radon rough-in, what they call it. So really what it is, it's below the slab, or even below we'll call it the finished ground. If this piping is put in, and basically if we think about a drain pipe that we would see in our bathroom with an elbow coming up and basically just sort of coming to the surface of the floor, or maybe just slightly above the floor, that's called what's intended to be a radon rough-in. So from that point, really what it's doing, that pipe allows air to enter into the pipe. And if a radon mitigation system was required, they would basically use that as something that we don't have to dig up the floor, that simply it's roughed in so it can continue the piping if required. Because first off, you don't need a worry about the fan and all the piping and everything if radon's not an issue. So, I mean, the cost at the time of construction is negligible when we think about it from a point of view of, what's 4, 6, 8 feet of black pipe 3-inch ABS black pipe coming up and penetrating through the concrete floor, or even if it's a gravel base, you know, we want to capture the gases that are coming out of the earth is really what that pipe is doing. But again, if radon's not an issue, well, it was just a small little inconvenience and a minor cost to have that rough in there. But I hate to say never, because radon, by the way, you could measure it one day and you could see that maybe over the winter it's changed the reading, or in the spring it changes. So again, because based on soil conditions. But anyways, to answer your question, yes, that's what that pipe is for, is to sort of not have to break up the floor and create kind of a disaster of how do I get the system down to where the source is, which is in the ground. Does that help, Dev?
Yeah, thank you very much. That fully answers my question. Really appreciate it.
And we have another hand from Richard. You want to go ahead, Richard?
I think he's still muted there.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. Go ahead, Richard.
Okay, awesome. Well, I've had a lot of experience with the radon in the area where I was inspector, and a lot of discussions about the radon pipe. And what I found was our biggest issue with it was actually the poly that they're putting down on whatever base it is. If it's a gravel base underneath a slab, the more important thing was getting the contractors to seal that plastic around the radon pipe properly and sealing it to the foundation. And that's where they were all kind of, I'll say, failing the inspection, because they're leaving leakage all around the outer edge of the slab once it's poured. So that was one thing that we found. And really, to the overall cost of building a new home to do a complete radon system, you could actually have the $150 device, do your radon testing when the house is framed up. You could get a decent reading, know if there's going to be a problem. And installing the system is so much cheaper to do it if you're just running a pipe up the wall and outside the house and putting in the fan and getting it tied in while the electricians are still there, rather than doing it later. So I was really strongly encouraging a lot of the contractors that are building a $400,000 or $500,000 home, just put in the radon pump right out of the gate, and be done with it, because it was so much, they're going to save money in the long run. So I just wanted to give kind of my input on that, because I've dealt with a lot of the contractors directly with radon, and fighting tooth and nail with them over it, because they just, a lot of them, you get, oh, this is so stupid, why are we doing this? You get a lot of that. So it was, yeah, I've done a lot of testing on it, and we've tested some pretty high homes. Like we were hitting over 1,000 on the scale there of the allowed 200. So I've seen a lot of very high end stuff going on out there. So it's a real thing. So that's just my input.
No, Richard, thank you. That's really good information, and certainly I agree with you 100%. In fact, thank you for enforcing that part of the radon, because some people say, well, why do I really have to do it? By the way, on FNNBOA, we have several webcasts on radon mitigation by people who basically put the systems in. So if you look at our FNNBOA webinars on YouTube, we have it's kind of a selfish plug here. We have about 70 webinars on various housing topics, and I know 2 of them specifically deal with the topic of radon. And one was certainly very detailed of what happens when radon systems sort of are installed improperly, because sometimes it depends on, like Richard points out, how well it's sealed, some of the details to it. Sometimes, what's shown in the building code is a couple pipes that go into the ground and sticks up in case you need to rough it in. So again, people who deal with it as their business take it seriously, of the importance of doing it right to begin with. So thanks, Richard. Good, great points.
And Claude, we have one more question because we're at time, so maybe you can answer that and we'll close it off. The question is, can you have HEPA filters/systems installed between the HRV unit and outside fresh air intake? And if so, does it affect the HRV's air distribution and performance?
Not that I'm aware of with HEPA filters. Typically, the manufacturers, as far as I know, most of the ones that I've seen or know about they have their own type of filtering system. The actual filter itself is almost like what I like to call a pleated core. And when I say pleated core, what it is that we can go one way and the opposite way with different cells and cores within the unit, and certainly one handles the incoming air and one the other handles the outgoing air. So you might say the two never come in contact unless the actual filter itself is destroyed or damaged. But they're sort of in their own separate compartments. So the ones I'm familiar with is certainly more of what the manufacturer has built into their filtering system. I wouldn't even say it's really picking up a lot of, we'll call it the fine dust and dirt per se. It's simply taking air coming in, which by the way could have bugs in it. And by the way, it's screened on the outside, but the air coming in inside when I sometimes clean the filter might have little, we'll call it minute critters in it, bugs, mosquitoes, tiny things that sometimes that's part of your cleaning process. And of course, over time, if you don't maintain it, it's going to eventually plug the unit and you're not going to get the proper air circulation. In fact, it may even cause a unit to fail. So good point. But as far as HEPA, I'll have to look into that. I've never seen a unit that actually has it. But good point. I would use both systems, but probably as two separate units. Well, I thank you. I think that was that it, Priscilla?
That's everything. Thank you.
Well, again, I like to thank everyone for tuning in and listening. I hope this has been informative. That certainly, if you have any questions, feel free to follow up. I think we can be free to release this presentation. By the way, it is a huge file, so just for download, it's big, but certainly I can send it off if there are people looking for it.
Perfect. So we'll go ahead and we'll close the webinar. Shortly, we'll send everybody a copy as well as a copy of the recording and a post follow-up survey. If you could kindly complete that, we'd really appreciate that. But we'd like to thank you for your time.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good one.
Thank you very much.